Sorry, there was a brief interruption there as I am reloading up my camera. So we were talking about the knowledge of the batin, or the knowledge of the interior, as a default position for all of us, for the mu'mineen, and how people can be so busy in their daily activities, ostensibly Islamic, playing the part of how we're meant to be practicing Islam, and yet they feel that there is something missing. And again, this is because I would argue that we have lost a knowledge of how to access an inner understanding of things. The scholars have said that walaya is the vehicle of the inner. It is the vehicle of the esoteric. It is the vehicle of the haqiqah, the inner reality of things. This is really the essence of walaya. So we can have many good and devoted mu'mineen, muslimin, who are outwardly doing everything correctly, but there's something missing within the consciousness, or there's something missing within the heart. And it is the heart and the consciousness that matter. We look at Al-Kafi in volume 1, where it is talking about the intellect. So many narrations stress the point that worship, it doesn't mean anything if one doesn't conduct that worship with knowledge and understanding. And this is not just a knowledge and understanding of the fiqhi aspects of that practice. It's a knowledge with the heart. It's an understanding with the heart. This is a path of the heart. In fact, interestingly, something that we overlook so much is how Imam Baqir alayhi salam has said that, is Islam anything but love? And we forget this as a component of practice, to even reflect upon this statement. What does he mean by, is Islam, anything but love? Especially again in today's climate. I think also that due to the political turmoil that is being deliberately stirred up with regard to Muslims, and in which the Shia youth are caught up, and of course our respected elders will be seeing over the decades how things have changed, how things are unfolding. They may even be concerned for the future of the young people. It's very important that we don't let this turmoil that has been stirred up by certain factions and by certain personalities to occupy us to the extent that we forget our own personal journey in this world and in this life, our own personal journey with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, in fact all of the Ahlulbayt, including Lady Fatima Zahra salam alayha, didn't just operate on the external level, at the material level. They operated at the batin level. They operated on the inner. They operated at the level of the soul. And they overcame challenges and difficulties at the level of the soul, at the level of the spirit. So this is an extra gift that followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam have. Yes, we can get involved in political activities, social activities, economic activities, and so on, just like everybody else. Like the Christians, like the Jews, like the Buddhists, we're doing the same as them. The only difference is that the women have a scarf and the men have a beard. So there's got to be something different with regard to our practice. And I would argue, and this is why I came into Islam and why many people have come into Islam, that Islam is one of, in fact, I would say the only remaining tradition that has an authentic training for knowledge of all levels of existence, that we live and understand simultaneously all levels of existence. Pretty much the Jewish tradition has lost its esoteric tradition. And I can verify this through having spoken to people who have grown up in Jewish families as Jews, that they will say that more or less the spiritual dimensions, the inner dimensions, the consciousness dimensions of this path have been lost. The same for the Christian tradition. Yes, Christianity is, spreading worldwide. We have many spiritual people. I'm not going to question, people's relationship with God, or the depths to which they go in their search for this relationship with God. But I would also argue that Christianity has pretty much lost the authentic initiatory tradition that was started with Prophet Isa alayhi salam, or let's say continued with Prophet Isa alayhi salam and put in practice by him. It's very difficult in the Christian world or across the globe to find an authentic practice that enables you to access who you are in terms of the interior of our existence in the world and the interior of who we are, of our souls. So what we have with the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam is indications that have remained in the texts, in spite of the fact that so many texts in the Shi'i tradition have been destroyed over time. We still have remnants left that we can make good use of to come to understand that our relationship with the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam is a dynamic, living relationship, not just in terms of remembering what happened to the Ahlulbayt in terms of their oppression, and remembering their wiladat and, remembering their wafat and, looking at their instructions and how we should live. But we also have a connection with them from our heart to their heart, from our center of consciousness to their center of consciousness, from our batin to their batin. And it is by means of this that we attain insights into the nature of the world around us, that we see beyond the apparent reality that is around us, that we can come to an understanding of what it is to be a human being in this existence. So the Islamic tradition, and in particular the path of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, is a gateway to an understanding of what it is to be a human being at a much deeper and more comprehensive level. It, in fact, is quite tragic when we think of the numbers of people who will be born and who will die, who will pass from birth to death, without ever having come to know themselves and without ever having to come to understand what this existence really is, what potentials lie within this existence. Another point I was going to make with regard to this is the day and age that we're living in with regard to information, and I think many other people have mentioned this point as well, that, and this is what I've noticed in my teaching, and I've mentioned it before in previous talks, that even though we are living in an age where information is so easily accessible, I have found in the people that I have taught a greater difficulty in being able to process complex concepts. And the nature of the education in the West today, especially also with the culture of watching movies and being on the phone, texting. In fact, I even heard that the next generation down from me has lost the ability to really communicate. Some time ago, when we had a youth show on Ahlulbayt TV, somebody asked one of the guests, who was a young man, what are some of these obstacles? What are some of the main obstacles with regard to getting married? And he says that because the young people who have grown up with texting, they don't know any longer how to communicate with each other properly. They don't know how to relate to each other. This is ironic because we're probably having more communication via texting than ever before. But people have lost that sense of how to treat each other in the best way as human beings through their communication. Not only that, as I was saying, in my teaching, I have found that the youth are not able to grasp a sense of the abstract. They're not able to conceptualize what is not physically in front of them. And this is a huge loss for our Muslim youth, because if they're not able to conceptualize what is abstract, what is not concretely in front of them, then they have basically lost at least half of this religion. They have lost an understanding and a means of living at least half of this religion. So one might think that it is only in the Western part of the world that the next generations have become less flexible in their thinking and less aware of the cultural, historical and economic context in which they live. But we can see that this is something that is spreading around the Muslim world. So the title of this talk was, how can the elders and the youth implement the practices of Ahlulbayt, or have the guidance of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam in the Western world? But what we find, and this is what I have found going over to the East, that the youth over there have exactly the same issues. You know, this world is shrinking, and even 15, 20 years ago, I was observing when I was much younger that this world is becoming homogenized. There is a single perception, a single view of what reality is, of what time is, of what history is. And in a sense, the world is losing its ability to see more than just what is in front of it. Quite interestingly, as we know, in the traditions, we say that the Dajjal has only one eye, and I've often thought about, what does it mean that the Dajjal has only one eye? And quite a few people say that, again, it's to do with perception. You only have one eye. You know, you can only see one aspect of reality. You can only see what is on the surface. You can't see beyond that. So if our youth are not being trained to have the ability to connect within, to have this ability to apprehend and sense and intuit spiritual realities, you know, to see doors opening in their destiny, to see doors opening to other worlds. If they don't have this training, then Islam becomes a pious practice, but pretty much a practice like many other practices. You know, it becomes like you brush your teeth every morning, okay, you do your salah every morning. You go to the gym, you know, you break your fast. So yes, we are doing the outward practices, but it is failing to transform us internally, and that is because we internally are still hooked up and signed up to the overall, we could say, matrix of the society that we are living in. Our consciousness has been trained and molded and influenced by the world that we're living in. You know, our thinking is a product of our society. And I have had parents come to me very worried about their children who are sometimes on the edge of losing their faith, as I have said. And this is again really an opportunity for us to reflect on how we are practicing this deen. That it is really time that we start not only to, we're not only listening to speakers, but we start to read the texts and contemplate the text for ourselves. The journey within Islam has to be a personal journey for everyone, in which each person cultivates their own intellect with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Each person is working on not only Islam as a group practice, or Islam as a means of complying with the majority of people around you, fitting in with your friends or fitting in with your neighbors. This is not what Islam is. It's about cultivating the intellect. We need to have people who are leading Muslim Shi'i thinkers in the world. And yes, we have without doubt many great and respectable scholars in the Muslim world, but we still find that due to logistics and maybe distance and geography, they are not in sufficient numbers engaging with the thinking of the Western world that is assaulting their own countries as well. Just to talk about, again, the culture that we are growing up in, we can see that there is scientific evidence to prove that watching television impairs brain development. An article published by the American Academy of Pediatrics states that neuroscientists have shown that environmental experiences significantly shape the developing brain because of the plasticity of its neuronal connectivity. Thus, repeated exposure to any stimulus in a child's environment may forcibly impact mental and emotional growth, either by setting up particular circuitry or habits of mind, or by depriving the brain of other experiences. While appropriate stimuli, close interaction with loving caregivers, an enriched interactive human language environment, engrossing hands-on play opportunities, and age-appropriate academic stimulation enhance the brain's development, environments that encourage intellectual passivity and maladaptive behavior, i.e. impulsivity or violence, or deprive the brain of important chances to participate actively in social relationships, creative play, reflection, and complex problem solving, may have a deleterious and irrevocable consequences. So although we are, as communities in the West, doing all the right things in terms of practicing Islam, the environment itself, as we very well know, is not always supporting that practice. Okay, there might be a few fortunate Muslims who are living in the West in a way that they feel satisfied with how they can practice their deen, and they will say that this society is supporting my practice. I'm able to practice my religion in a way that I'm satisfied. But we are having a fallout at the moment of youth who are drifting away because the efforts of the parents, the efforts of the centers, and the efforts of the ulama and the community members are actually proving to be insufficient at providing the environment that young people need to come to understand what Islam is, and through means of that to come to understand who they are at a deeper level. And I know that this suggestion is probably very costly, especially for people, living in the States. But I can say that if any of your young people, you feel that they are drifting away, they're feeling disenchanted or depressed, or not inspired by Islam, in spite of the fact that they're growing up in a Muslim family, I can really recommend taking them to a country in the Muslim world. As this piece said that I read just now, Islam also has to be experienced. It's not just a set of rules that you tell your child and you expect your child to abide by those rules.